Today I'm delighted to speak to JoAnneYates from MIT. So JoAnne, what have you learned in your research about virtual teams?
One of the most important things, I think, is the necessity to make explicit all of the sorts of agreements but among a group that normally happen implicitly. So how often are we going to communicate, in what ways, how do we handle that, and how do you make that explicit? Because if you don't make it explicit, you end up getting in trouble. One of the issues I think is really important is something called the mutual knowledge issue. How do you know what they know, and how do they know what you know, and do you both know that each other knows it? Catherine Crampton has done some work on mutual knowledge and the importance of that for trust in teams. And to get that, you have to be way more explicit. If you're all in the same location, you don't have to talk about it. It just, everyone knows what's going on. But that's not true on virtual teams. So this issue of explicitness, making a communication plan, making agreements, this is how rapidly we'll get back to you. If you send an email within 12 hours, you will get a response. That kind of agreement is really important, because if you don't have that, then you get misunderstandings.
What are some of the additional different kinds of overheads that come from being in a global virtual team?
Yeah. So I think there is the overhead to making these explicit agreements, but the fact is that occasionally it actually is useful. You find this when there are teams where there's one person geographically dispersed and everyone else is in the same location. Because they have to spell a lot of things out explicitly for that one person at a distance, sometimes it even helps a co-located team. Because occasionally there are things that people in the co-located team don't know about and need to know about. So occasionally it's even useful to have one person at a distance. But most of the time it's a matter of overhead, the overhead of having to be much more explicit, having to say and say again the same things. For example, if you don't respond to an email, if you're at a distant location and you have a holiday, and so you're not in the office that day, no one's in the office that day where you are, so you don't respond to an email until the following day, and they think you're just not being responsive, you're not holding up your end of the process, etc. So people will assume that you're not a good team member, rather than understanding that it's because you had this holiday. So you have to tell them, I have a holiday coming up, I won't be online today. That's how this works.